Well, I mean, as it happens, as these things evolve, the biggest player that creates the biggest hurdles will set the speed of the process, right? So if the Europeans say you can't do X or Y, or we're going to treat privacy in the following way, global scalability is impeded by that. If the Chinese say this, or if California says it, it has an impact, um, and so can act as a kind of a control or a guardrail. But let's go to this other issue that you brought up, this Apple paper, because I've seen a lot of controversy about that and debates about some people embracing it. More people that I've seen have taken issue with it. How would you frame it? What do you think its consequences are?
One of the ways that I saw it framed was that what the paper found essentially is that and I should say I'm characterizing it here, and I hope I'm not mischaracterizing it. But the paper, the big thing that people took away from the paper was that it found that reasoning models could essentially, I'm trying to remember the exact phrase they use, hit a point where they just fall off a cliff, where I think it's called the accountability cliff, something like that. I'm not going to get it right here, but and that these reasoning models, as they got like past a certain point, were no longer able to actually come up with correct answers, and in fact, in some cases, just a regular LLM versus reasoning model would do a better job. Um, the reasoning model, the sort of show your work reasoning model, has really exploded in 2025. It's the way that AI companies tend to. Everybody sort of moves towards the same thing, and so now you go and you put an input in, and you may see it pretending to thinking through the problem. I say pretending to think because I don't like to really give AI agency, um, and it is sort of figuring out these questions. It's asking additional questions to the ones that you put in the prompt. And what the Apple paper said effectively was like, this doesn't work. I mean, or it works up to a point. And then other people have critiqued it, saying that some of the math problems they set up there were no answers to. That it was impossible. It's not a debate that frankly I've been following super closely. It's one that I've kind of checked in on. But I think if you've used, I think part of the reason it resonates is if you've used, reasoning models very much, you can sort of see this happen for yourself. You can see them, have problems. And I guess to me, the thing that's more interesting. I don't really have a dog in this. Is that it does point out that we're that what we're doing here with these seems like it maybe is plateauing a little bit. I think that's something that you do hear a good bit. I think there's some credence to that. Have you found that your use of ChatGPT or Gemini has dramatically improved in the past, what was it, 8 months since a lot of these began dropping? I'm trying to remember when. I guess it hasn't been 8 months even. It's really been, time moves quickly. It's been 6 here. Um, and I don't know. I personally am. I think I was, a little bit interested in the Apple paper because it personally it confirms some of my biases about the reasoning models, about whether or not they're able to perform as well as we sort of anticipated they were.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, one of the things we've talked about here is the quest for the thinking about artificial intelligence has been around for decades and decades. The intensive level of progress that we've seen in the past 10 years or accelerated in the minds of people since ChatGPT and what the end of 2022 is another level. But the interesting counterpoint to me of this cliff theory is one that we're also hearing a lot these days, and that is we're within 5 years, 3 years, a year, from ASI, from artificial superintelligence, and this are and processors are getting bigger and faster and capable of doing more amazing things, and clearly people are going to keep trying to solve problems like the one you're talking about. How do you reckon because people fairly sane, Eric Schmidt, I saw a video clip the other day. There's some fairly responsible, sane observers on this who are like, well, we're just getting to the point where this is going to surpass human capabilities real soon. And we're all going to sit around feeling dumb.
I will confess being skeptical of that. I mean, I one of the things that I try to encourage our publication, our reporters, things to and editors, and is to approach a lot of the topics that we cover with the attitude of curious skepticism. And I guess that's how I feel about superintelligence. I'm there as you mentioned, there are a lot of smart, serious people who are all in on it. The Facebook deal with Scale AI, pending deal, Scale AI, which basically is a whatever, 14 point something billion um, deal to get a 49% stake of the company, and very importantly, its CEO to run super intelligence inside of Meta. Forgive me, I'm habituated to saying Facebook over many years, and even though it's been several years now, I still say it instead of Meta. But they're not spending that much money, in a data and talent acquisition if they didn't believe in it. And although certainly Meta has made some bets that don't seem like they've panned out, including becoming Meta and metaverse. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know more than some of the folks on the inside of these companies who are seeing things that I haven't seen yet, that I don't that I you know that I don't have any way to gauge. But like I said, I was thinking about this honestly this morning. What is it about something like superintelligence, about AGI, these things that are almost I wouldn't describe them as quite religious, but there's an element of belief to it that is appealing to so many very smart people. Why do we think that we're going to be able to build something that's going to surpass the intelligence of the builder? It's an interesting question. I don't have a good answer for it, David. I wish I did. I wish I could sort of definitively put a stake down, but I'm just going to remain curious about what happens and skeptical that it's actually going to arrive.
Well, you guys have a kind of special perch as you watch this happen. You write about it on a regular basis. You also convene people to talk about it, and I followed with some interest. You do MTech, what you call some of your conferences. There was in May an MTech conference in AI. What I people can go online and look at what the agenda was, and you guys have written about it somewhat. But wandering around, it, what were the things people were talking about in the hall?
Something that we've actually talked about a few times following that conference. Our senior editor for AI, Will Heaven, was the one who was really struck by this, and once when he brought it up, it was the experience I had. Was how flat-footed even very sophisticated people feel right now. The thing that I'm saying to you, superintelligence, I don't know. That comes down to a much more practical question for a lot of people, which is like, well, how can I incorporate this stuff into my business, into my life? Where do I start? A common thing that we heard was something along the lines of like, I really want to bring in some sort of AI into my business, but in order to do that, I have to convince the finance department that we're going to be able to achieve cost savings with it, but I don't know what it's going to do. And so I don't know how to calculate what those cost savings might be. And I don't really know where to start. Help. And I think that's a relatively common sentiment right now. Like and when people, are approaching this, I mean, there's certainly debate about its usefulness, but when people are approaching it, like nobody really knows. This goes back to your earlier point. What type of effect it might have in any individual business potentially. And when they're talking about cost savings, what they're often talking about is reducing headcount and staff reductions, laying people off in order to let one of these things take their job. And what I was really struck by with our conference was that people who have been working in the industry for a long time have now often familiarized themselves, or I say tech, I should say tech industry versus AI industry, for a long time have now used ChatGPT and Gemini and even more specialized tools to the point that they're wanting to bring them into their business, but unsure how to. I mean, there's some places where it's relatively clear, like we did hear from people, spoke to people who are using coding assistants who are, even fully vibe coding now. But if you are working in something that's not a software company per se, it can be harder to know where to start. And that was the big takeaway for me. And these sort of esoteric discussions that we can have about research papers um, come down to a really practical level for a lot of folks in ways that was grounding for me and made me think like sometimes maybe we should do a better job about sort of stepping back from the big picture stuff and get and get more involved in the day to day usefulness of the stuff or how it can be used.